Linda and Yoko both were present at that conversation.
End of intermission. Part 2.
Hello and welcome to episode 226B of SATB, the second hour of the conversation with the musicians panel convened to give their takes on the Get Back documentary by Peter Jackson. I'm speaking of Orion Salazar, Dennis Deichen, Pat Sansone, and Luther Russell. Hopefully you guys have heard hour one already, and now we've got the second hour and one more coming in a week. But it was a great, great fun conversation, and honestly, as I recall it, we did this in December. It was something that, as we were about to enter the fourth hour, I had to stop it because we weren't running out of things to talk about. It was that fun and enjoyable. And I will say this, that just from a personal observation, I think that because I've now continued to watch it in pieces since, there's definitely so much more to glean when you've had time to steep on it and think about what you've seen. And these guys, right out of the box, were full of great thoughts. But I do think that it benefits from maybe stretching out the period between viewings and then thinking about it. So people who review the show upon first watching and can't wait to air their opinions, I don't think it's worth a damn, really, unless you're not into thoughtful analysis. But whatever. I will say another thing, too, just as an aside, that typically this show gets accused of Lenin bashing historically. That has happened a few times. I guess from doing a critical analysis of things, interviews and statements and literature out there, etc. But in the wake of the first hour going live, I saw a few comments about McCartney bashing. So that's a switch. And I guess if people think the show is bashing on one Beatle or another and there's not a unified consensus, I guess that's a good thing. Maybe we're on the right path after all. Anyway, going to get out of the way. Let's get going with the second hour here. And be sure to catch up on the part 2 and 3 of Peter Jackson. You really should, because it's that good. And in between, we've got the Gary Wenstrup Beatles Olympiad shows, lighter subject matter. There will be more stuff coming, serious stuff, some big, well-known names coming to the show this year. I can't tell you when, but I've got some commitments that I've been lining up from people, so that's all to the greater good. And other than that, there's a few platforms, including YouTube, that are airing the SATB Raw version of the show, which just means minus the music and inserts. You still can get the show full-length from the SATB website, as well as Apple and any number of other platforms out there. So it's around. Not sure about the Spotify status yet. I get contradictory information on that, but maybe if you guys are subscribers, you can check it out and see if it's there as SATB Raw, which is how it appears on YouTube. Anyway, second hour.
It's going to be on their new LP coming out very shortly. You like it?
Fabulous, definitely. Fantastic.
Have you any favourite amongst the Beatles, or are they all your favourites?
They're all a few lads, aren't they, really? Get around, don't they?
Pardon?
So they get around.
One thing I noticed when they're kind of bouncing ideas back and forth about where to do the show, somebody, I think it was Paul, I could be wrong, but somebody throws out, we should do it at the Cavern.
Yeah. Oh, man.
How
I think it's
incredible
Ringo or
would
someone
that
said-
have been?
That's a great idea. They should have done that.
Yeah, that was the best idea that anybody threw out.
And eventually he does do a version of that with the early Wings, just showing up and playing, we're not billed as Paul McCartney's band, we're just some band. The divorce conversation at Apple, that's where he's trying to get John to go back to January 30th, John. You remember how great and exciting that was? He's the one that would tell Rolling Stone a year later, our best music was never recorded. Nobody could touch us in England, what we produced in the clubs. You're being handed that opportunity, John.
Yeah.
Say yes to it, for God's sake.
Well, it is absolutely just exhilarating watching them become the Beatles on the roof. I mean, we've all seen the rooftop footage for decades. We've seen it over and over, but I felt like I was seeing it for the first time. I really was.
Yes.
Felt like you were there.
It was just exhilarating to watch them just form into the Beatles up there, I mean, the first Get Back performance is great, but they're still kind of getting their sea legs, they're kind of trying to, where is this happening? Yeah, this is fun, right? But when they go into Don't Let Me Down, it's like they just plant themselves into that space and just dig in. And the way John's stance and his intensity and just the way he stands, it's like the defiant John legs spread on stage thing. And you see it happen.
You do. Yeah.
I never noticed that till this viewing. I never noticed it in the Let It Be film.
I just totally burst into tears when that happened. I was like, this is
it's a triumph.
It's a triumph. And you've been watching them sing these tunes and funny voices, which is fun and awesome and amazing, you know, and we do get some truly serious performances here and there. Not that many, you know, most of the performances of the tunes that we see up to there, they're working stuff out or they're singing in funny voices or they're going into other places. So when you see them dig in to this material, it's almost like they're discovering it for the first time. You can see it on their faces. It's like, oh yeah, we're the Beatles.
Yeah.
Seeing them lock eyes, that was really cool.
It's amazing to watch. It's just amazing.
Do you guys feel like the energy they got from the roof, you can feel it feeding the rest of the year? Like, clearly that's how they're able to just, you grow up wondering, like, well, how did they muster up Abbey Road? Now you can see why.
Well, they roll right into it. It's like, screw your movie, Ringo. We're going to work on weekends. We're going to start tracking this album.
Yeah, yeah. But they're high. They're high on it. They're high on the Beatle drug. And they're like, yeah, we're a fucking good band. Fuck this shit. Let's just keep rolling.
That maybe goes to what Dennis was saying about what would another record have been like had they started touring, had they started playing live. Maybe Abbey Road is part of that, because I think Paul says, you know, hey, we're playing better now than we ever have, which is true. That's why, for my money, is like that rooftop concert is the best live Beatles we have on film, just as far as the band grooving with each other and just the energy they make and the magic they make. It's just the best.
I had a thought too, which was, it never dawned on me that it's got to be the only time they've played since Hamburg where they actually heard themselves.
True.
Good point.
They never would have heard themselves. So they've spent all this month hearing themselves go out to a live situation, albeit controlled, and still hear themselves. So you guys know, like, just from being musicians, like, it's a huge difference. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air for them, I'm sure. So I'm sure they're just like, yeah, we got this. Those, like you said, Robert, those looks they exchanged, especially John and Paul. They're like, okay, we got this. We're doing this. It's crazy, man. I totally agree with you that it's the best performance you're going to get from the Beatles.
And George looks like he's having a really good time too.
And he's shredding.
He's on fire. He's amazing.
I still love that solo for One After 909. It's one of my favorite solos.
Yeah. Or what he does, the fills on Dig a Pony or I Got a Feeling.
And I love them. There's a moment, you know, it's the last tune. It's when they do Get Back, when the police are on the roof, and George instigates that. I think maybe they finish
Don't Let Me Down.
Don't Let Me
Dig
Down.
A Pony. Oh, well, okay.
I can't remember which one. Yeah, is next to last. But just as the last chord of that is fading, George is the one that says to John, let's go, let's do it. Let's do Get Back, right. You know, and they launch into it. It's this like tiny little moment, but it's George that makes that happen. I think that's a really sweet moment, you know.
And he also flips the amps back on first. He's like, no, fuck this.
Yeah, he's like, I'm here to play. I want to play this guitar.
My single favorite moment of all time is, it's very small, but during the rooftop, there's a point, and you guys can appreciate this just as geeks, but like, there's a point right before they do Don't Let Me Down where these opposite dudes on the roof go, rock and roll. And Lennon goes, you too. I mean, who would have ever thought in a million years that someone was able to communicate with Lennon on the roof and just scream rock and roll at him as if they're at a concert? Yeah. There are things happening. Them seeing the crowd down below. There are things to indicate. I don't care how many times you tell me it's a recording session. It's a concert. I'm going to have to just stand by that, put my foot down on that, because when you get this band and Paul looking at those people up there and kind of getting energy from it, then seeing the cops and there's energy, there's a repartee, but rock and roll.
I guess we said this already, but maybe in a different way. On the rooftop, they realized we can still really do this. You know, we really can. You know, it's different than being in the studio. We're up here and the adrenaline's kicking in, and we're the Beatles. We can still do this.
And the playback, it could have sucked.
Right.
The playback's kicking ass so hard that it's the canonical versions we know and love. I mean, they're going downstairs immediately listening back going, we do fucking rock. So it's kind of this confirmation, immediate confirmation of how good it went.
And the total opposite of that thing that Paul was talking about at Twickenham of being in his head and being so theoretical and thinking in circles. It's like, that's a frustrating, painful place to be. And that's the total opposite of what they just experienced up on the roof, of just being in the flow, being in that moment, letting the spirit happen. You know, it's the juxtaposition of those two experiences, I think, is really at the heart of what the documentary is about.
Yeah, right.
It's sort of like the underlying theme of the whole thing.
And to Dennis's point, the way George Martin is the guy there saying right when they go downstairs, he says, hey, you guys could take this on the road. Isn't he the one who says that at the end?
I think so.
So it's sort of like, it's a kind of amazing when the one paternal figure that is there is just kind of like, you know, we've been needing a daddy figure. You know, the daddy figure's been there the whole time. And he's telling them, you guys sound great. You've got the tunes.
How great is it to have some, although it's not making Pepper or it's not making Revolver.
It's not EMI, but yeah.
But just to be able to see George Martin interacting with them at that time. I mean, we've got a couple of little bits here and there, but to actually see him having a conversation with them, interacting with them, what their energy was like together, that is just incredible.
The PA conversation and his deference to Glenn, but Glenn's deference to him and that tandem.
Yeah, he's incredibly cool with Glenn Johns, right? He's really sort of letting him do his thing, but also sort of guiding him. But I love all the shots of George Martin beaming with pride. Just you can tell he's so happy that it's happening, that they're happy, they're making it happen. Obviously, they probably had some strife in the preceding year. And you can just see the joy on his face, and everyone in the room is lit up when they're making it happen because it's the Beatles.
Is everyone else here also geeking out on, I mean, of course you're geeking out on the gear, but just noticing things like, am I crazy or is the Mark VI also what George is playing in the Hey Jude video?
Oh, I believe it is.
Yeah, it's the same bass.
The bass 6, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you start noticing things like, Pat, we were talking the other day, and what was it you noticed about the Rickenbacker stuff?
When he pulls out the Rickenbacker, that I just gasped, you know, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe he's giving us this moment, you know. Can you try another bass? And he pulls out the psychedelic Rickenbacker. Obviously, he doesn't really think it's the right bass for the moment, and the nut is kind of messed up, and I don't really know what these knobs do anyway, which was like, wow, that's incredible. But then so we see the psychedelic bass, and he obviously sends it off to maybe get the nut fixed, you know, Mal, you know, take care of this. And then during the out credits, when we have the final day filming of Two of Us, and, you know, when they're back in the studio, you see the Rickenbacker leaning against the drum riser, but now it's stripped natural. The psychedelic paint is gone. So that must have been the moment when Paul's bass went from the Magical Mystery Tour psychedelic bass to the natural Rick. He must have, when he sent it out, he must have said, oh, and by the way, you know, have them strip this passe psychedelia off and make it like John's Casino or whatever. That's just such a cool little weird slice of life.
That's amazing that you caught that. And I'm just like on the second and third watches, I'm catching Ringo's drum stool from behind. Now we're getting into musician geek stuff, but that's what we're here for. But like, oh my God, I must find his exact chingering and his drum stool and that type of music. They're unpacking the Leslie. Like, you can't get enough of that shit, right?
No, even the box, the brand new Leslie box is like a beautiful image unto itself. See, I always wondered about that Rick. Did he have two Ricks? Was there a natural one and the psychedelic one? Maybe you're right, actually. Maybe he just had the one.
I think he only had one of those. It was given to him.
So did the Fool paint the first Rick? That's got to be a Fool job, right?
Well, you know, there's pictures of him playing it in 1967 when it's just the sunburst. And then I think he painted it around the time of Magical Mystery Tour. Like when George painted his Strat. And
right,
Paul,
right.
And John painted his acoustic guitar, the J160.
They're definitely trying to get McCartney to use another bass. Several times, different people are asking him, can we have another bass?
Yeah.
And then can you turn down the bass? And George Martin says, it's the loudest thing in the room.
Did you guys notice the Hamburg Hofner, the missing one that everybody thought was stolen at Twickenham? It's at Apple.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's not the one with the set list?
No, that's the 63 Hofner. That's the one with the bassman sticker on it.
So he's got 3 Hofners. 2.
The 61, the Cavern one, the Some Other Guy one. And then he used that till 63 when he got the one that was through the 66 tour, which then he took the pick guard off and put the bassman sticker on it for Let It Be. And so that's the second one. But the 61 with the 2 pickups close together disappeared during the Let It Be project. And everybody said it was stolen at Twickenham.
Wow.
But there it is at Apple.
It reappears.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mysteriously. I love loving close-up shots of the black tape wound strings that now I know after all these years why the bass tone on Let It Be alone is so tubby and distorted compared to some of the other records. It's got to be those tape wound strings. I don't know if he was using those kind of strings before with the Hofners.
So they're not the pyramids or whatever they use.
Just metal strings as opposed to ones wrapped in black tape have a sort of more tubby sound. And we're used to that sound on Let It Be. It's got that gnarly, loud, distorted bass sound. Now I know why.
And as long as we're not being nerdy and on the subject, does anyone know where they got the Bluthner? Is that a rental, or does anyone know anything about the Bluthner? Because
it's at Twickenham, I assumed it was a rental.
That's what I'm thinking.
But then it shows up at Apple, which means it had to go down those steps, which must not have been the easiest thing in the world. I understand the presence of the Rhodes because Fender gave them all that gear, so it's there when Billy Preston shows up. But the Bluthner, that was an odd choice. I'd never heard of it till the first time I saw Let It Be.
The interesting thing is that when I worked with Ethan and Glenn, Ethan had a Bluthner, which Ian Stewart had given his dad in 69. But I don't believe it was the same one. But the point is, it could have been from the same lot, the same auction. And it's very possible that they got them. That could be Glenn's, is my point. Not the same one. But it's very odd because, 69 Bluthner, like when do you even run across one of those? But Bluthner is pretty popular in Europe. It's not as popular here. There's like an outpost for a long time here. But I'm just curious if anyone knows any information about that piano or if people ever talk about it, because it's a pretty great piano. Yeah. It's a pretty distinct sound. It's on a lot of great music. And I'm going to assume they continue to use it in Abbey Road. Maybe not. Maybe they don't bring it over there for the Abbey Road album.
Well, Paul obviously loved playing it because, he would show up to the studio and there's a couple of the Twickenham things. Like the first thing he does, he arrives and he goes straight to the piano. And we
knocked out his piano songs for the next 10 years.
And we get those amazing sequences of him at the piano just kind of going in and out of songs, and the little piano music lesson that he gives to one of the stage hands.
That was definitely a favorite moment for me. This is all the music in the history of the world. However he puts it. It's all right here.
It's so beautiful. I mean, and when he's doing that, like that sequence when he's going through backseat of my car, and there's a couple of other things, but those sequences, it's almost like he's in a trance.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like as soon as he sits at the piano and he starts going, he's somewhere else. He's like in a trance, and it's really mesmerizing to watch.
Yeah, the Paul trance is scary. He does, in those trances, he pulls back to Martha, My Dear, but he does, as far as new stuff, he does Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, Another Day, Long and Winding Road, Backseat of My Car.
And the fact that he can do that, not in his comfort zone with lights and people filming him and all kinds of distractions, he can tune into that and zone everything else out.
That is his comfort zone. That's what I would argue is that's a security blanket.
Yeah, it's just amazing what it tells us about him.
And in a way, it's bittersweet. It's kind of like part of the bittersweet subtext of the whole thing is that you see him in that situation being so comfortable and so himself, and kind of in this trance place, in this kind of like worry-free zone where he's obviously just where he's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But then when he's interacting with his old friends and they're trying to create, and he feels the pressure of being the boss and the deadline, and he's agitated, he's not comfortable and he's pained. It's like, as much fun as they do have, and there's like so many great sequences of them having a lot of fun, there's also a lot of sequences of Paul looking pretty pained. And even the material, Long and Winding Road and Let It Be, I mean, they have this heaviness. He's feeling this heaviness, and it's almost like he knows deep down that the end is near, And he's like on fire, creatively. And he doesn't even understand his talents. They're just coming, and he's discovering himself. And it's confusing for him probably on some level. He's like, I'm in this place where the music is just rushing through me all the time, but I can't communicate with my friends. It's like a really painful place for him.
Yeah, when they leave, they're out of there, and he still pulls out "Oh Darling" and does that demo of what the fuck. When Glenn gets the one chance to use his gear, Robert, is that the actual? Are we hearing the demo?
Well, that's why he stuck around before they cleared everything out, was to get that on tape that caught. Yeah.
Yeah. Are we actually hearing? Because I'm hearing delay, but are we hearing because I've heard that tape is lost. So I don't know if we're hearing.
You might be hearing All We've Got.
Yeah, it sounds like because he's got delay on the vocal.
And they had a Benson there.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the one. I think that's the demo that he's doing, and they got it on film.
That's what I think, is that I think we're not hearing what Glenn's recording is my point. Because I think that's lost. I think that's what I've heard. But all in all, the footage of Glenn operating the tape in the little closet, which is just like, that's just an extra gift just to see. And Paul laying down the demo. Everyone's gone. They've vacated the premises. The gear's gone. And he's got to get, there's this song too. I mean, seriously, like, what's going on here with this guy? He's a fucking genius.
Yes.
It's bittersweet, I think. And there's a conversation pretty early on when somebody says, maybe George is like, well, maybe we should have a divorce. And Paul goes, well, yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying at the last meeting.
Right.
So this is in the stew. I mean, it's obviously on their minds that the end is near, and it's kind of permeating everything.
Do you think they're being fatalistic, like this thing is winding down, or do you think that they might be trying to figure out, how can we go forward? Something has to change or else it will be the end. Because you've got both George and John thinking, if we get more egalitarian, more inclusive, expand the borders of what is Beatles. But Paul seems to want to preserve what he knows and loves as the Beatles, this four-man ensemble, maybe Billy just for this, but not as a fifth member of the band. It's interesting that as he is on this great high-energy creative tear of all this music pouring out of him, it's like, why didn't it occur to him then and there, maybe the Beatles isn't the place to put all this? John's already done some things outside the group. George has done Wonderwall. Maybe it's time finally, or was his own identity as Beatle Paul so wrapped up that he couldn't even conceive of doing anything outside the Beatles?
Paul McCartney goes too far.
Yeah.
Maybe they're all in this moment thinking, if this works out, maybe we will move forward. And they're all walking on the ledge. And then, of course, they do Abbey Road. So maybe it was the moment where they're saying, let's see if we could pull this project off. And
yeah, I tend to agree with Dennis that I think Abbey Road is the result of them just pulling through the doldrums, as they put it. I think what Dennis is suggesting is probably the closest to reality, which is they just moved forward and did Abbey Road. We got Abbey Road because they made it through this moment. We're probably sitting here lucky that we got that album. Even with John, even had an accident. Even part of it didn't almost happen with that shit. There's a lot. Alan Klein. There's all these things, not getting Northern songs. There is things like pushing and pushing and pushing against them. And they somehow pushed through and made this one record. That's probably the Rooftop leading through Abbey Road is probably the real triumph of the Beatles. And that's why the movie of Let It Be, who wanted to know about it? You know what I mean? Like afterward, they were probably just like, oh my God. Now we've got to bring this out into the world because we owe this contractually and we're not there in the headspace. And it's just so anticlimactic because they really did win the big trophy. They won, they won through their bullshit.
The whole thing was just very confusing. Like, what is this? And I think I love what the things that Peter said about Let It Be in the first hour of your conversation with him, Robert, about how Let It Be gets seen through the lens of the emotional landscape of 1970, which was really, really bad. So, of course, all the memories of the Let It Be film are so dreary. But actually, the film itself is not that dreary. It looks really dreary because of the technical things that we talked about before. And the emotional landscape was incredibly painful at the time, so it's hard to separate the two. But if you just watch the film out of that, it's just a kind of a weird impressionistic rock film.
To use your word from our last conversation, collage.
Collage, yeah, exactly.
The other thing I was going to say about the film Let It Be, it was designed to be seen on the big screen in the theater. And it's a very different experience seeing it. I saw it when it came out. I don't know if any of you did, but it was a whole different impact and a different, almost a different moment in time, too.
With an audience there.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah.
I saw it on the big screen years later, but not in 1970, usually like a midnight showing somewhere.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience because you're seeing it, the rooftop, larger than life and all that stuff. So it was cool. But there was still, I think, an undercurrent, maybe because we knew this was the quote unquote swan song, that you felt a little downbeat, even at the lighter moments. I think it's because we were so programmed that that was what Let It Be was. And so you went in there with that expectation, and then the confirmation bias of the George and Paul exchange and whatever else made you feel like, oh, this is not the happy Beatles. John trying to do that guitar part on I Got a Feeling, and Anybody Got a Fast One after Paul yawns during Across the Universe. It was almost framed as a downer, whether by design or just because we walked in there expecting it to be a downer. Every time Yoko appeared on the screen, I'd be in audiences that would hiss, that sort of thing.
So great.
Yeah, what was that like, Dennis, when you saw it contemporaneously? What vibe did you get?
I was 13, and my friends and I knew that the Beatles had broken up, but we still had hope. Seeing that, and there was something in the air back then when the solo albums were coming out. Even then, there was this feeling that maybe it's temporary. And there were those moments where they played on each other's records. And when the Ringo album, I remember when that was being talked about, and the fact that they were all going to be on Ringo's album, it was so exciting, and we did believe in Beatles, and Beatlemania. We still wanted it to be. And when Let It Be came out, there was still that glimmer of hope, but just by seeing them on the big screen, that maybe it wasn't really over. And somebody would flip some switch and they'd get back together.
So you saw it as a positive thing with that, because there they are with an audience being the Beatles. It feels like, yeah, the Beatles, they're out.
They're there. And the album comes out too, right? There it is with the four of them on the cover, new phase Beatle record. And how can you reconcile the fact that they're not still together? Certainly there was a down feeling to the movie, but it was still so exciting and we just couldn't give up. But what I meant before, too, about the movie being designed to be seen in the theaters, the same way you hear imperfections and different artifacts on CDs that you were never meant to hear when they was being engineered for etching onto vinyl. It was the same thing with the image and the cinematic feeling of seeing it in a theater.
That's an interesting point. So Michael Lindsay Hogg, you're kind of intimating that it's like just certain things are done cinematically, and we all grew up, the rest of us grew up videotape and laserdisc and seeing it on the small screen or maybe a midnight showing, which sometimes aren't that big of a screen. So maybe it did get the short shrift as far as its intent.
Yeah, it's just a different medium. But yeah, there still was the feeling that, they were unhappy. But then there was levity too. So we were confusing. We really were still very, very hopeful that things would turn around, And I think that movie helped that feeling.
Did you have awareness at 13 as you're watching that what you were seeing coming out in spring of 70 was actually like 16 months old?
Did we realize it? Yeah. I remember hearing about the imminent release or the forthcoming release of the Let It Be album being talked about. Well, it wasn't imminent. It was several months prior. I guess it was probably late 16. When was the Glenn Johns thing slated for release?
Well, there was definitely September of 69 is when he turned in another draft of it, coinciding with the second cut of Michael Lindsay Hogg's film cut. But that was when it got leaked and the radio stations were playing the acetates of it. And I think Beatles Monthly magazine said that it will be out by the end of the year, by Christmas.
So I guess I was hearing on the radio, even on AM radio, that there was going to be another Beatles album. So we knew that, I forget when we put it together, that this was not a new recording. I can't remember really, but It was the same type of I'll never forget, in 1966, I had just purchased Yesterday and Today, and I didn't know about the British configurations versus US. And here's this great new album, Yesterday and Today. And a week later, we're in the family car, and the DJ comes on, oh, there's a new Beatles album coming out. I said, yeah, that's old news. It's called Revolver. What? What?
Wait, what?
Yeah, so there was always a little disconnect, a little confusion with some of the info back then.
Especially in the U.S., yeah.
Of course, by the time the film and the LP came out, we knew it was older recordings. It was still a bit mystifying in that regard.
Yeah. I remember being at least vaguely aware when McCartney came out a month before. And mind you, I'm a little kid, single digits, but they both had the black covers to them.
That's right.
And I thought, are these of a piece or something? How are they connected? Like, is this Paul's extra material or something? I don't know. In your kid head, you can't make sense of it.
It felt really big, though, like the Beatle talk post-breakup. I would even venture to say throughout the 70s until Lennon's death. It still loomed just so large. It's like no one didn't talk about the Beatles.
And in 74, they were stoking that fire.
That hope remained, right? The hope was there all the way through. I mean, I never for a second thought there wouldn't be someday where maybe something is going to happen with these guys.
And then Beatlemania came out. It was like there was always some big event, whether it was a hit album or some kind of movie or a theatrical production. It was just the Beatles was just too large to ignore, and then Wings, of course, was just so huge. By the time Lennon died, then that just stuck it in stone. That just solidified it.
Yeah, you hit a wall, but it seemed to be cresting. 74 was the big year of the 10th anniversary in America. So you've got every one of them with albums and hits on the radio that year. It's like huge tidal wave. Yeah. Paul comes back the next year with Venus and Mars, 76 he tours. Ringo's still out there. 78, you've got the Ringo TV special, I Want to Hold Your Hand, yes. The Pepper film.
I saw that in the theater when it came out. And it was like, all about the mania. That was a huge movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Amazing.
And I went and saw Beatlemania, and there were little matinees. I remember my dad taking me to see like Yellow Submarine, a Magical Mystery Tour would always play in some theater. There was always something happening.
Yeah.
Dennis, do you remember those multimedia shows that were going around in the 70s? The Beatles Rise Again, the Beatles Away with Words, where they basically put you in a theater. This happened in Chicago, and I know it was going around the country.
Oh, no.
It was like big venues, like 2,000, 3,000 seats, where they would do a multimedia show of like slides and maybe a little bit of footage, but blasting Beatle music chronologically and images of the 60s and stuff like that. It was basically a PowerPoint played through big speakers. And they'd sell tickets to this and fill the rooms up, and they'd come back like maybe the following year. It was amazing.
Of course, in New York, we had the Beatle Fest. It goes back to the mid-70s, and that's where I met Mal Evans.
Wow.
Oh, speaking of which, right? Is anyone else just so pleased to just feel his energy in this and know that there's so much goodness there and so much humor and light and smarts, wisdom? Like you can sense it.
The grin when he hits that anvil.
Oh my God. But just, or I just caught when he walked into Apple and said like, I'm on a new diet. It's called no food.
Yeah.
There's all these things, but all the way down to him leaning over the piano and how he is allowed to not just suggest things to Paul songwriting wise, but just tells him simply what to put in.
Yeah.
Put Standing and Waiting. And then you start to think of fixing a hole in the...
Yeah. Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
But in this movie, he's actually substituting words for all of them, for Paul, John, and George. I'm pretty sure he's got a word in, each of their tunes. He's helping write the tunes. Period.
Straight up. I turned to my dad during the Long Winding Road thing. I said, that's writing, right? He said, oh, absolutely. I mean, he's not suggesting, he's telling him and he's writing down and it makes the final. I mean, Mal Evans, man. I mean, not to be underestimated. It's a beautiful thing to see that much of him.
It was wonderful. Yeah. He was the supporting male actor in that film to me.
Man.
So great.
Just when they get that weird prototype from Magic Alex, which is a whole other conversation, but he comes up and he just says like, he makes some comment and he's laughing. It's like, you can sense that he's one of them and you can sense that they completely trust him and you can sense that they're a little lost without him. It's always Mal, whatever they need, whatever they need to do. It's like, it's like, oh, you've taped this thing in the wrong place. Mal,
Yeah.
He's just there. The best scene of all is when they're leaving for the day, and Paul just goes, "Yeah, we'll need an anvil and a hammer." And Mal's just going like, he's not, it's not some flippant thing out the door. He's got to go get an anvil and a hammer. You can see his wheels turning right away. And the next scene, there's an anvil and a hammer. Paul just says it without even turning around. It's like, holy shit.
How great just to see so many of the supporting characters. We know their names, but we've never seen a lot of footage of them. Derek Taylor wandering in, and Mal, of course, and it's just
Kevin Harrington.
I wish we had gotten a little bit of Magic Alex kind of walking around looking confused, but I will say the way that Peter Jackson gave us Magic Alex in that scene where it's like the day that they go to check out the new studio, and Peter Jackson kind of presents it almost like a scene from a horror film.
And George Martin's going,
and I think the script on the screen says, George Martin sends an urgent SOS to EMI, and you hear Magic Alex with all that echo on him going, it sounds like they're on a submarine that's going down. It's so funny. I just think it's one of the funniest things I've in the whole film, and
great film craft.
I know Peter Jackson must have had a real laugh putting that scene together.
Orion, what were you going to say about Mel?
There's a nice shot of him lovingly putting tea towels on the drums very carefully and gingerly.
Oh, wow.
And all that kind of stuff is, we love it.
Well, that's why I love this conversation, because you can't catch everything. Like, you guys have all told me things to look for the next time, because I missed that one. That's great.
Here's two small things. Did anybody catch there was one shot, I think at Apple, where they're loading in some gear, and John is actually one of the guys helping to load in a Leslie or an amp.
Yes.
He's bringing in the Leslie. He's helping the guy.
That blew my mind.
It's like there's John Lennon in his white suit.
Yeah.
Like helping the guy lug the Leslie into the studio. Like, that is incredible.
There was one other small little moment. I wonder if any of you caught this. I think it was at Twickenham. Paul is instructing something, and instead of counting like you would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, he just mouths the riff instead of counting it, which is something unschooled musicians, like, that's what I grew up doing. I didn't learn to count until 10 years ago, but instead of counting beats and bars, he's actually, they say, no, it goes like this, doodle doodle doo doo doo. That was another thing that caught me. So they're still doing that.
That was something that really stuck with me watching the whole thing. It's like, we have all these years of doing this, and we're building on the backs of all the work that generation of musicians did. They were the architects of what we do, right? So we have the language, we have the lingo of when we're on the studio floor and we're putting arrangements together to say, do a push there, before the chorus, or go to quarter notes on the snare for this bit, or whatever, just the lingo of pop music and what we do. Right. But they didn't really have that. And so the way that they're communicating with each other about these arrangements is so interesting,
it's
because
funny.
There were times when I wanted to go, just tell him to push. And instead he's going all the way around the room saying, you need to get there a little faster, and then, it's like, they're like kids, they're kids that they don't really understand all the mechanics of the things that they've been doing.
But they have the vision. They know where they want to go just to convey that. But at the same time, the great synergy they have between them. I loved watching George kick in contributions to stuff when it's ostensibly John and Paul's song that they're working on. It's like, no, that's not going to work. Do this, blah, blah, blah. The great example, of course, is Octopus's Garden, which is such a beauty moment. I loved it in Let It Be. And now it's a little bit more fleshed out here, where he's seizing Ringo's ideas like, okay, I see where you're going with this. This is what needs to happen. How many countless times that must have happened in the recording career that we don't know about.
That's the way it's done, and we've been able to actually watch it happen in real time. It's just incredible. Watching the writing, watching John and Paul throw words back and forth for Get Back, and John throwing out, but he knew it wouldn't last, and Paul goes, oh yeah, that's cool, yeah.
Well, yeah, Get Back is the piece de resistance, and why the film is called Get Back is because never before have we seen a song from its very first second of inception all the way through the composing of it, all the way through every stage of it, all the way to the fucking roof. That whole scene where I think George is left already and Paul and John are working on Jojo, and they're going back to
Tucson.
Yeah, Tucson, and they don't have Martin yet. It's like the beauty of this is you get a window into John and Paul's writing process, regardless if it's for the cameras or in Twickenham in front of it. It's only chance you're getting to see how they communicate with each other. And it's interesting because some of it is foreign to me, but some of it is totally familiar. Like when I've collaborated with people, it's like you just throw out shit till something sticks, and you're going to say, Paul's putting it on his hamster wheel, and he's going, Jojo this, Jojo that, Jojo this, Jojo that, and John's grabbing what he wants, because that's what John does. You know, the classic thing, John comes in with an idea sometimes, maybe not in this, but he'll come in with an idea of like, I have an idea for a song. Clearly, Paul has a million ideas for that. Sometimes he used to apparently go away. John would have a cigarette. He'd come back with the song now further written based on John's idea. So clearly Paul is the hamster wheel. He's the assembly line. Yeah. John's the one he's the mold. So they have this way of working that you're like, okay, I get it. This is how John and Paul work. And that's a beautiful thing when it comes to Get Back, because you see George and Ringo reacting. There's that moment where they've reached kind of a bit of a low point, maybe the first low point in the thing. And you see George and Ringo just sit back and watch Paul do that Paul voodoo thing.
Well, you know what's funny, though? At that moment, what caught my eye is that they're absorbed in what Paul's doing at that conception of that song. And George lets out this big yawn.
Yeah.
At that moment. And there's something about that.
He does, but then next second he goes, what does he say? He says like,
that's good.
That's good. This is really something. Like, George is he's very important in their whole process. Or when they're working on Let It Be and John's trying to get the bass and George is kind of being a de facto lieutenant to Paul, and he's showing John, like, I actually know what you're supposed to be doing here. I know what Paul's fucking talking about. I'm going to show you. We've all had that in the band, that guy. So George is feeling really important. And just after that yawn, he goes, that's good. And that's, you know, Paul, and as old friends, you know, when Paul hears him say that, keep going. It's like he recognized it. You're seeing the Big Bang that must have happened time after time in the Beatles since the beginning, since I saw her standing there or something.
There was an interview with Paul on Terry Gross recently, and it's a great interview. And towards the end, Terry asks him a pretty philosophical question. I can't remember exactly what the question was, but and I've heard him talk about this before, but he talks about how in the early Beatle days, there was a situation where they were like coming back from a gig and the van broke down. It was freezing cold and they were on the side of the road, and it was that moment of like, what the hell are we going to do here? And Paul says, somebody said, it might have been me, I don't know who it was one of us Beatles said, well, something will happen.
Yeah.
And that stuck with him all these years. As an 80-year-old man, it's still in his mind. It still works inside him, you know, just that, like a mantra, you know, well, something will happen.
And it's probably George who said it.
Yeah, it sounds like a George,
It really does,
You see that at work when he's doing what he does. It's really inspiring, you know, the way he's kind of pulling this idea from the air, but he's also like really digging in and not being super precious about what's coming out of his mouth.
No, you can't be.
And he's just singing gibberish where he doesn't have something, and you just and he wants words that maybe don't necessarily mean something, but just feel good in the mouth to say, or just, you know, that whole sequence when he's like, well, it needs to have a hard D or a T, and he's, you know, and that's so interesting because
that was John saying that one.
No, I think that's Paul, actually. It's Paul.
Because John's writing Dig a Pony, and he says, I won't say Skylight, even though it's more beautiful.
Yeah.
It needs to, maybe Paul says
well, it's obviously something that they share, you know, and that's what's so cool.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Paul, right. They're writing Get Back, and there is one point where they're getting the Tucson and all that shit together, but Paul says, it's all the right stuff, but it doesn't sing well. It's not in the right order. They know that much.
You're sort of watching him do this almost like a painter. It's about colors and about sound and texture. And it's not just about, well, we have something to say and we need to say it in this song. It's like, let's just jump into this amorphous bit of clay here and chip at it, and something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Complete faith in the process.
Well, that's why it's weird when Paul does have those tough moments, because Jesus Christ, dude, you've made Sgt. Pepper with these guys. You've made the White Album with these guys. You've made 1 million #1 singles with these guys. It's sort of like why you're not having trust in this moment is clearly something he's recognizing that does not scanning well with him. He's sensing it in John, sensing it in George, not necessarily Ringo. And so it's kind of an odd thing. Like, they do get past it, but for all of us to see, you're seeing this moment where they're not clicking and we're not sure why.
Even with the impending doom or this obvious feeling that they all sort of know something is coming to a head, some people are moving away. I feel like obviously like McCartney is the guy who's well known who needs a band. He had a band all through the 70s. The other guys are more comfortable having their identity outside of the Beatles and being solo.
Wow.
But I also would have to say that just people in the room, just cameramen, strangers, just other people, that makes it tough. It's for anyone.
It's kind of shitty, and all the shittier that it's kind of Paul's idea.
Yeah.
So he kind of shot himself in the foot on that.
Well, I love that moment when he's describing that sort of self-consciousness, and he's talking about Yoko, where he talks about if he's trying to write a song with John, he then suddenly want to write about white walls because he thinks that's what they want to hear.
They're so hyper aware. I mean, your thing, Pat, with the camera stock, it's like, that's kind of a revelation of the whole thing, is just to see how in tune they are with the moment. Those guys, nothing slipping by any of them. Mm-mm. Not by Ringo, not by John. You know, Ringo can be having this conversation. And if you actually go back, no matter what, this is my little experiment when I watched this last time was, no matter what anyone says to any of them, watch what they say back. Any line they say back, whether it's Ringo, George, even if you think they didn't catch what the guy said, they did. And they say something right back at them, and that person doesn't catch what they say back. And it's usually a retort like, yeah, well, we tried that on Magical Mystery Tour. Or we did this, or we did that. You know, there's always something where they're always paying attention.
And there's a lot of recall.
You
think, oh, why would they remember? Or John talking about Bob Wooler, you know.
They've done so many drugs. What?
Yeah.
All those. There's so much recall and there's so much reference to past moments.
They're geeks like the rest of us. They're so steeped in their own history.
But as an academic, Robert...
He's very clean, though.
He's very clean. That's the first one. He's clean. But as an academic, Robert, like just outside of all this, for what it is that you actually do as an author, I mean, this has to be like a treasure. It just has to be a pile of gold for you.
It's bottomless. There's a lot that confirms what you already were inclined to believe. Other things that now you get a lot more nuance out of it. And still other things. And we talked about this with Peter Jackson, that it's like, I'll use the comparison we've talked on the show before. For however many people have read Lennon Remembers and what impact it had on you when you saw the words on the written page. And then you heard the audio. Wow. And it gave it a different spin. It's like, oh, he's being sarcastic here. He's joking here. It doesn't come off as this venomous thing. So we've had, for the Let It Be project, we've had the Doug Sulpy book, so we can read the dialogue or where it was going. And then we've had the Nagras, so we're hearing certain things. Now we're getting the visual, and that adds another layer all on top of it. Just hearing words being said isn't enough if you get a visual messaging coming out as it's being delivered that takes it in a different direction than the perception of just the audio.
Oh, the big one was the speaking up to the mic.
Speaking to the mic.
Speaking up to the microphone during the whole head. Have you written any songs? You know, well, I'll try to get one on some. I mean, I've always heard that.
Because you're being self-aware.
Yeah, we're facing a crisis.
Yeah, I've always heard that as like, wow, McCartney sounds pretty mad right now. And then you see that, and I was just like, oh my God, they're like hamming it up, you know, they're doing a bit.
I think it's because they were aware of the boom mic coming over them, and had that not happened, it would have gone down that serious line of, you really are putting us in the situation. It was in the Peter Jackson conversation, but I don't know if it was in part one. I can't remember, but he talks about, if you look at the seconds right before that exchange happens, Paul's kind of pacing around like, I've got something heavy to deliver to John, and he's waiting for his moment, and then he does it, and then the boom mic swings over and kind of deflates it.
It kind of deflates it. I mean, it sounds like you think that the most egregious error on the Beatles myth has been essentially the 70s authors, the 80s authors reinterpreting just their words, just like you said with Lennon Remembers, like, is that's what set back the myth, is that all these authors with their agendas, essentially, that we grew up with, right?
Well, they took him at his word. Jan Wenner was not a journalist. He was a transcriptionist. He took it down, didn't challenge him, didn't try to dig deeper. He was a fanboy. So that's what you got, was just that propaganda, which John immediately, like the next day, probably wanted to dial back. And he absolutely did not want to publish as a book because he knew that it was not going to stand for all time.
But these authors run with it for decades.
They absolutely did. But the fact that we were programmed to think of Let It Be as this downer, terrible breakup movie, which it really isn't. I mean, it is what it is, but it's not that. And all the talk going into Peter Jackson's Get Back that, now that we saw the highlights reel, the sneak peek that he put out last year, and I was guilty of this too. It's like, is he overcorrecting in presenting it as all happy camaraderie? No, I think ultimately what we got over almost 8 hours was being as honest as he possibly could, the good and the bad, with the raw material he had to work with. This is what there is. All the stuff that we didn't know because we got 88 minutes back in 1970. Now I can give you almost 8 hours worth, and there's still another 49 more or whatever. He's presenting it. I don't think he's putting an editorial spin on it. I think he's just trying to present it as best he can as a filmmaker and as a fan, trying to serve the history as best he can. But given, again, we have to work with what he gave us and not the other 40 plus hours. There's a lot to analyze and draw from this, and getting the visuals, a huge critical part of that. For example, on the 13th, after George's walkout and they're sitting around, it's the conversation of 50 years from now, Yoko sat on an amp. That moment that we don't have on the Niagaras because nothing's being said, but the camera's capturing, and then there was two. And Paul is heaving. He is so filled with emotion at the thought of his beloved band is just falling apart. We didn't know how deeply we could have sort of inferred it and thought, well, yeah, clearly he's the biggest Beatle fan. He wants to keep them going. He's having a physical reaction to their falling apart. That was incredible. Or in the moments right up to George's walkout where he's sitting there on Ringo's riser and the continued cutting to his face. I was reading comments from people about this once again, and George comes off as such a whiner. I saw a man who was in a great deal of pain in that moment. And it's like he did the only thing that made sense to do, which was leave this painful situation.
Absolutely. The one thing we don't have in Sulpi's book and all that stuff clearly is the flower pot conversation. So I don't know if anyone here has also tried. It's very fast. There's a lot in there. I've paused it. I've tried to watch. I've just been meaning to ask you, Robert, it's like that has to be the holy grail as far as where you're coming from, because you're going to be sort of parsing that and figuring out what they mean and translating certain aspects of it for years to come, right? Because there's things you can get from it on the third watch. And once you start wrapping it, because the way that they communicate with each other is not necessarily, it's only what they mean to each other.
It's in code to outsiders for sure. We can do our best, but they've known each other so long that they've got a way of talking where they know what they mean.
And it's mainly Lennon. It's mainly Lennon you got to pay attention to.
Well, yes, the guy that he said, I'm doing this for the communication aspect. And he's the guy that's probably doing the least amount of communication, at least in the Twickenham aspect of it.
The word self-preservation, which he's used before. He's used as his way of being honest in other interviews. He said, I'm only out for self-preservation. I mean, that is the Lennon, I don't know if you call it a tactic, but that's the byline. That's his version of honesty. He's saying, I'm out for number one. And if it means being more collaborative, I'll do that. If it means not being collaborative, I'll do that. So I'm just wondering your take on that conversation.
Yeah. And as somebody who has had the Niagara and the Sulpi book to study it without the great clarity that Peter Jackson's just given us by removing the sound of the clattering silverware and all that ambient stuff, it wasn't in the film, but it is in the audio. And I picked up on this. It's going to be 10 years now since I wrote the Revolver book. But the mystery of Paul's walkout on the last day of recording for She Said, She Said. He had alluded to it in many years from now. And he was like, there was the one time I didn't play bass because we had an argument and I said, fuck you, and stormed off. And we've tried to figure out ever since, well, is it George playing bass? It's just George on vocals with John on that. There's no Paul to be heard. It was one of these things that I came across accidentally. I wasn't necessarily researching Revolver when I came across that conversation. And when John says, and I think this part is in Get Back, the only way I can get what I want, meaning arrangement-wise, is if I gave it to George, because he would take my direction, not push back. And then Paul responds with, she said, she said.
Fuck, he does say that in that. You're right. That's what I'm wondering when it was. And I didn't even take it as the title. You're right. It's just so fast. That's the golden moment.
Yeah. God bless Peter Jackson for so many things, but for clarifying, and God bless Michael Lindsay Hogg for planting that microphone.
Oh my
Jesus
God.
Christ. What a stallion.
Just online chatter, because people they can't take the gift you've been given. They have to tear it down. Besides calling him a tool. Well, I think that was an invasion of privacy. You know what? I am damn glad to have that invasion of privacy. They were on his grounds. That's Twickenham. They weren't in some restaurant in London. That was at Twickenham, their canteen there. And he saw it. He's openly throughout the Niagaras, you hear him talking about, I wonder how I could plant a recorder in the telephones here anytime they're having a conversation so I could record that too. It's like, you know what? You're working on their dime. I say, do whatever you have to do to capture the story.
The only words I ever caught on the shitty version of the tape was when John said festering wound. That's all I ever heard.
And we didn't give him a Band-Aid. Yeah.
What day was that recorded? Was that the day that George quit?
He quit on the 10th, which was Friday, and this was the Monday.
And so they had the meeting
at Ringo's house.
The first meeting already. And that's what's important about that conversation is there two things. Like they're realizing they have to now really think about the situation. But also when that moment when Paul says, and then there were two, clearly John's having a shit fit because George walked out because of Yoko. So now he's kind of lost both. You can see his relief when John calls in and says he's coming in an hour. His whole demeanor changes. Yep. Now they got to get down to business of fucking discussing George. It's private. Hogg puts the mic up. And now we get Peter Jackson's done his duty for life here for this moment where honestly, it's coming fast. It's coming furious. You're going to have to really write it all out and really see what they're saying.
They're just laying out the Beatles' history in this little 10-minute conversation.
But the real history, the hidden history, the dynamic.
Yeah, not for public consumption.
Can't wait for somebody to transcribe that so I can really read it.
And annotate it.
Robert, get on it.
Well, is that in the book?
As much as they could decipher. And it's all paraphrased, of course.
Oh, so not prior to the film?
No, when the Drug, Divorce, and Flipping Image book came out, it's in there.
Oh, no, I mean the Get Back book.
Oh.
They would not have been privy to the movie, so they don't actually have that transcribed in the book, I don't believe.
That's a good question. I've got the book. I should look. I haven't gotten that far into it.
I heard they were all working independent of each other.
They were. That much Peter Jackson
So
confirmed.
I don't think it's in there. So
okay, you're probably right.
Hey, Robert, do you know where, they don't say this in the film, but were Yoko and Linda present at that conversation? Because it seems, and it's presented in the film as if it's this intimate one-on-one conversation with John and Paul.
Linda and Yoko both were present at that conversation.
They wouldn't have gotten a word in edgewise anyway because those two were going so fast and furious at each other.
I feel like in that conversation, John Lennon is being incredibly honest and trying to tell Paul something that he's probably had a hard time telling him or whatever. And actually, Paul is, again, not to knock him, but maybe being a little disingenuous. Hey, no, you've always been the boss.
Totally.
I'm just number two. But whatever his reasons for saying that, I hear John being incredibly honest and just soul bearing and speaking a truth about the whole band and the dynamic of we just trying to do what you want us to do without too much static. You wouldn't let us do it. You wouldn't let us help you arrange your tunes. No problem. You can help us arrange ours.
That's a good point right there.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't help but wonder, what songs is John talking about when John says, I didn't always like it when you arranged my songs and you took my songs in a direction that I didn't want them to go, but I didn't want to fight you because I knew that any of my suggestions, you would shoot it down.
He uses the word afraid.
Yeah, afraid. It's honest and it's heartbreaking, and you can't help but wonder, what is he talking about?
Well, he could have been afraid because he was fucking high out of his mind on LSD constantly, and it shattered his ego, and he just didn't even have like a leg to stand on, confidence wise, or it could have even predated that.
Yeah, he's the legit OG tormented genius, sensitive artist guy who's issues, neurosis, and that's part of why he's so like real. And there's a lot of contradictions and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I feel like he's always copping to being afraid. He does. He says it a few times in this very film.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't hear McCartney talking in this way,
No, you don't. And what we see in the film is greatly shortened. So we're getting a streamlined version for sure. Yoko and Linda were there at that conversation.
Wow, Jesus Christ. You wonder how much more honest it might have been. Or something, or just it
Hence
seems
George's
pretty
point,
uncut.
can't just the four of us meet nobody else? And John acted like he didn't know what he meant.
Which they did have, right? The second meeting was the three of them where they worked things out. And the next day they're at Apple, yes?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do know that Derek Taylor describes in his $3,000 book that he put a lot of pressure on George to come back.
I'd believe that. I mean, I think that when George comes back at Apple, he's like, good vibes, man, and blah, blah, blah. And they had that good day that's not recorded. But he obviously got his way. Judging from the flower pot conversation till then, they made up their minds to just say, listen, what is it you need? He said, this is what I need. It's no longer a fucking live taping. We're getting the hell out of Twickenham. Even, I don't know if you caught as they left, you overhear Michael Lindsay Hogg saying, yeah, it was a bad idea anyway, or something like that.
What I find interesting is it's one thing to change the venue to something that's very uncomfortable and foreign and just not conducive to creativity, to something that's very comfortable that you hear them praising it over and over again, how it feels good to be in Apple Studio. So that's going to change your mood and your energy level and all that stuff. But I wonder, too, if taking the high concept concert off the table also relieved a tremendous amount of pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I never say those words, but I have to think that because of the way everything changes.
If I can only put myself in that place, and I'd think, yeah, it would for me, I'd be like, geez.
Well, McCartney says early on, he's like, we've gotten shy. He says, I've gotten a bit shy about some things. And I think he's talking about, he hasn't been on a stage in front of an audience for several years. So, that's looming as well. So just what a grab bag of insecurities were just hanging over the entire Twickenham experience. It's like we've thrown ourselves into our worst nightmare, and it's being filmed. But getting back to that one thing, it's when I was listening to that conversation, the flower pot conversation, and John was talking about Paul and his arrangements and how maybe he's kind of bullied some of the arranging process. And I use that word just because John says, I'm afraid, so obviously there was something in that, and I was wondering, wow, I wonder if is he talking about Strawberry Fields maybe? Is he talking about that era, the Pepper era when obviously like Paul was kind of becoming producer,
Right.
And John was never happy with Strawberry Fields, which is just incredible to imagine that because it's like my favorite track of all time. It's, one of the great masterpieces of the 20th century. And John was never really happy with it. And I was wondering, gosh, I wonder if he's talking about Strawberry Fields right now.
That's a really good point, as opposed to It's Only Love or something.
And then there's that scene, like in the next episode, and it's one of my favorite scenes of the entire film, when Paul's at the piano playing and singing Strawberry Fields.
Jesus, yeah.
Yep.
A few feet from John, and John's playing along. That is just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, because there's just so much love in that moment. It's like Paul is like singing it in a really soulful way. And it's obvious that it's a meaningful song for Paul. As close as it is for John, it's also incredibly a deep thing for Paul as well. And you see that in that moment. It's just beautiful that exists for us to see.
Goosebumps, man.
Yeah.
End of part 2. Intermission.
Something About the Beatles. Created and hosted by Robert Rodriguez. Executive producer Rick Way. Title song by the Corgis.